The Community Radio Continuous Improvement Toolkit is something that we developed about 3 years ago, primarily in the Indian context, because community radio stations were beginning to feel that they are doing all this work, but they don't quite know if they are doing well, if there is a better way of doing things. And they were a bit tired from externally imposed evaluations. And so we worked with a lot of community radio stations in India to develop this toolkit in a participatory way as a self-assessment toolkit.
Okay. So were you finding that perhaps stations in India were failing because they didn't get enough funding, because they didn't have the impacts that the funders required?
See, not so much about impact. And this toolkit is not going to help them document impact. This toolkit is a lot more about practices, processes within the station that makes it a good community radio station. I mean, impact is something that one doesn't have control over, and donors always insist on specific outcomes and measurement of your impact. This toolkit will help stations put in place better, more improved practices within the station that makes it a good community radio station.
Okay, and you talked about the different chapters or parameters of the station, and you mentioned 9. What are those, please?
I hope I'll remember all of them. But see, there's one on content management. I mean, who produces, what is the content and all of that. There's one very important one on governance, and which is about management structures. There is revenue generation and financial accountability. There is one on feedback and grievances. How do you engage with audience feedback so there is one on technology management. Who makes the choices about what technologies? Because in community media, technologies ought to be ones that people can easily use. And do they have any choice about what technologies are brought in to the station? So things like that. I mean, it's mostly to do with practices and processes, but that has principles of equity, inclusion, gender equality, and all of those are cross-cutting ideas across the 9 parameters.
Okay, and when people get the community toolkit first, there's a number of steps that you encourage. So what would be the first 1 or 2 steps?
I think once you decide that it's a good idea to collectively look at your own station about how you're doing. When I say collectively, all the different stakeholders, the important actors within the station.
And who would those stakeholders be?
Let's say the production and management team to begin with. But then if you have community representatives on your board, you have an advisory board, you have an NGO that works with you, I think it's a good idea to include community members in this process and sit together. It might take a couple of days. I mean, people need to spare time and take the parameters one by one, see where the station stands. There are obviously going to be aspects where you are doing well, so you give yourself a pat on the back, and where you are falling short, you tell yourself that I can improve on this in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year. So next time you look at yourself, you use these goalposts, saying, I had decided 6 months ago I'll do this. Have I been able to do that?
Yes. So you're measuring your own success as such.
Own success.
Just on, I think the second step was to involve other stations. Is that correct?
Yes. And importantly, what we are advocating is one is self-assessment, but the other is a peer review. It's always good to have a couple of people who are running stations like you are into your station. And I'm assuming community radio stations are not in a very competitive domain. They should be more cooperative than competitive. But if they come into the station, there is some sharing of experiences. They are not there to judge you, but to share their own experience on certain parameters. And they take back something they learn from you back to their stations. So it's a method that is based on this idea of co-learning.
Okay. And the toolkit was, I suppose, launched in India, as you mentioned,
yes.
But it has since travelled around the world and it's been
yes.
adapted, and
yes.
we heard it's been adapted for Germany
yeah.
today. But you did mention that when it was brought to Africa, that perhaps there was more diversity in the 5 different countries that got together, and that was a real, I suppose, improvement on the toolkit, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, the toolkit was originally developed with the context of India in mind. However, once we started putting it out in the public domain, there are different countries which are getting interested. In Bangladesh, they have done it. In Africa, these 5 countries have come together, East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda and Burundi. An amazing diversity of contexts.
And can you give me an example of something that changed from the original Indian version when it went to Africa?
No, for example, there will be particular words that mean something else in an African context. There is ethnic conflict that's quite rampant in one country in Africa, and they say, well, I mean, this can create trouble. We can't ask a question like this. So people were sensitive to local cultural and political context. I mean, that's the way it should be. I mean, this is not going to be a universal prescriptive tool for everybody to use in the same way.
Yeah? Yeah, as you said, it's continuous learning, so it's been continuously adapted.
Yes.
So if somebody was interested in finding it out and having a look at the 60-page continuous improvement, community radio continuous improvement toolkit, where could they find it?
They can visit our website, that is uccommedia.in, or you can simply Google UNESCO Chair on Community Media, and when you go to our site, there is a pop-up on the toolkit, which is now version 2.0, which has been refined further after we implemented it in India and Bangladesh. Mm-hmm. So that's downloadable. There is an English version. And if there are speakers in Bengali, Hindi, those versions are available. Mm-hmm. And I'm told in Germany there is a German version on the BFR website.
So Vinod Pavarala, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.